Hello students, welcome to week 8 for COM 403. This week we are wrapping up some of our final assignments as the course is beginning to end. This is our last week of the course, so as some general housekeeping rules, it's important to go through and make sure that you complete all of the assignments listed here, as well as complete the course evaluation. If 90% of the students in the course complete the course evaluation, everybody in the course will receive 10 extra credit points. So it's very important that we get that completed by Friday of week 8. You'll notice also in our week 8 deadlines there are different deadlines than normal. The course ends on Saturday, so your discussion board number 8 is due on Friday with replies due on Saturday. Your journal entry is due on Saturday, as well as your reaction paper is due on Saturday. Work is not accepted after the course end date, so it's imperative that you get all of those assignments in by Saturday rather than Sunday. We're reading chapters 31 through 32 and 36 and 37 this week, as well as watching 2 videos related to the last 2 theories we'll be covering this term. When you look at the discussion board number 8, the prompt tells us that you're going to analyze and reflect upon some questions that relate to the texts that we are covering. Particularly, we're looking at some the continuum between objective and interpretive theories. We've discussed this a lot in the beginning of the course and kind of continued this conversation loosely throughout the last 7 weeks. So please spend some time looking at that. You'll find questions related to that, specifically in the beginning chapters, chapters 1 through 4, and then you'll see how it's interwoven into every chapter. So each theory is identified as either being on the continuum of closer to objective, meaning we can use hard data and things like that to prove the theory, and interpretive, meaning there's multiple interpretations of the theory. So in that continuum, it's important to see where the theories fall along those lines, how these threads are really utilized, and how an interpretive scholar as well as an objective scholar would look at these things. Once you finish that, you'll complete your last communication journal. This week we are writing our last one and wrapping up the 3 prompts. So the first prompt in week 1 focused on you identifying some things you wanted to get out of the course. The second one was in week 4, where you started to look at where your progress was in the course and how that was effective or ineffective in your learning. And the third one now is going to be a 2-page essay that's focusing on what you learned in the course. Remember, we're moving towards metacognition. Metacognition is talking about what we're learning and understanding what we're learning through talking about that. So in this course, we've spent time on planning, monitoring, and reflecting, as well as evaluating our progress to support some metacognition in this idea of communication theory. So this week you'll answer 6 questions related to information in the course related to other courses within your majors, how you felt some of the strengths of your work was or not. If you could provide opportunity, which assignment would you have redone to submit to learn more from it? What will you remember 5 years from now after taking this course? And what advice would you give to a friend about this course? And then lastly, how can you use this course in future communication classes that you may take? So it's very reflective and interpretive in terms of identifying what you've learned and what you feel you've gotten out of the course so far. Reaction paper number 4 asks you to provide a critical reflection and reaction to communication accommodation theory. We're only focusing on 2 theories this week, and communication accommodation theory, known as CAT, is the one that we're going to spend the most time looking at. So the CAT theory claims as a general rule that people respond positively to convergence and negatively to divergence. So as you think about that, explain the differences between accommodation, divergence, convergence, and maintenance within the theory of communication accommodation theory. I'll provide you with some specific information about that theory, as well as you'll get that out of chapter 31 in the reading this week. But it's important to keep in mind that that's what we're focusing on. It was originally considered to be a speech theory. Now it's more of an intercultural theory related to how we accommodate communication. Nonetheless, it's going to be a very interesting paper for you to write. It's a very well-known and well-utilized theory within intercultural communication and adapting our communication to others. As we look at communication accommodation theory, it's important that we see that it is a pretty objective theory rooted in the socio-psychological tradition. So now that we're coming out of this critical assignment, you can kind of look at this from a different perspective. Particularly, communication accommodation theory, known as CAT, focuses on patterns of convergence and divergence of communication behaviors. It was developed beginning in 1973 by Howard Giles, who found this to be related to speech and called it speech accommodation theory. Within the last 20 years, we've adapted it and focused on identifying that it doesn't particularly relate to just speech and speech patterns, the actual verbalization of communication, but it deals with communication as a whole. So communication behaviors, nonverbal, semiotics, all of that. And our behaviors are very influential in how it relates to cultural accommodation of things. Particularly, CAT is a theory that considers when people interact, that they adjust their speech, their vocal patterns, and their gestures to accommodate others, especially in new cultural experiences. So as we look at that, we can see that it is the constant movement towards and away from others by changing your communication behavior. We consider accommodation to be related to people's goals for social approval and communication efficiency, as well as our identity. So when we accommodate our communication, meaning we change it to be in line with the communication that's happening in a situation maybe that we're communicating with others, that's for social approval. We don't want to be turned off by people and people saying, oh, that seems odd that you're saying it that way. So in different cultural settings, whether that deals with ethnicity, or it deals with workplace, or it deals with the baseball parents at the baseball field, the football parents at the football field, we constantly accommodate our communication, meaning we change it for efficiency to move towards social approval, as well as shaping our social identity in those cultural situations. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind. It's really the constant movement toward or away from others by changing your communication behavior. It's an intergenerational context, and really showing that CAT researchers have shown consistency and interest in exploring communication accommodation across generations, but also in defining young communicators who are teenagers up to adults in how they accommodate and adapt their communication behaviors. Convergence is, so communication accommodation relies on two strategies primarily. Those primary strategies are convergence and divergence. So convergence is a strategy by which you adapt your communication behavior in such a way as to become more similar to another person. So really, it's the adaptation of communication behaviors, particularly in the speaking style and the way that you communicate with another conversational partner, as well as in group communication. So another way you can converge toward people is in the matter in which you could maybe adapt your language so that it's more easily identifiable by people in different contexts. So the way you speak at work versus the way you speak at home to your children is different. That's communication accommodation theory at its best. You are adapting your communication at work to perform and communicate with adults at an adult level, and when you communicate with your children, you're going to communicate with them at their level in a way that they can understand the communication. So that's a very good example of seeing how we adapt and accommodate. Convergence really is happening in that instance, where it's the manner in which we're adapting our communicative behaviors to reduce social differences and ultimately become more similar to another person in the conversation that you're having. Divergence, on the other hand, is a communication strategy of accentuating the differences between you and another person. So in interethnic encounters, you might insist on using a language or dialect with which the other is uncomfortable with. In terms of speech style, you could diverge by employing a thicker accent, adopting a rate of speed and speaking style that relates to another, as well as being distinct from you speaking in an either monotone or exaggerated animation. So divergence is a communication strategy that focuses on looking at the differences between you and another that moves towards convergence. So we identify divergence, meaning we see that there is some accentuating differences or that between you and another person, and now we're going to move towards convergence, where we can communicate on a level that's effective for both of us. During intergenerational or intercultural encounters, CAT researchers have found that divergence is the norm and convergence is the exception, especially when the two aren't of the same family. So as we communicate with people that are in different generations, we can find that we can experience more divergence than convergence. Particularly, young people characterize the elderly as closed-minded, out of touch, angry, complaining, and negative towards youth. The elderly often increase their social distance through self-handicapping, which is a face-saving strategy that invokes age of reason and not performing well. So it's very important to see how that can happen. When we move into this communication accommodation situation, we typically move towards maintenance. This is persisting in your original communication style regardless of the communication behavior of others, which is similar towards divergence. On the other hand, we can move into over-accommodation of our language, which means we can speak in demeaning or patronizing ways, excessive concern for paid vocal clarity, amplification, messaging, simplification, repetition, or similar situations that you would find in a divergent situation. So it's really important that when we look at it, we are moving towards desire, approval, personal identity that helps us get to a convergent state that elicits a positive response among those that we're communicating with. It's very similar to attribution theory as well as related to many other theories that deal with intercultural communications. It's really important to see that as we've chatted, that this theory really considers when people interact and adjust their speech, vocal patterns, and gestures to accommodate one another. Once that occurs, we can see where there's relevance within our communication patterns and accommodate those communication patterns to be more effective communicators. In wrapping up, it's important to note that we're reading chapters 31, 32, 36, 37. We're watching 2 videos on communication accommodation theory, as well as completing discussion board number 8 by Friday, with replies post due on Saturday, journal entry number 3 on Saturday, as well as reaction paper number 3 on Saturday. It's been a pleasure to interact with you all this course. You've all learned a lot, and I've been very, very grateful to be able to be a part of seeing the growth that you've all done in terms of becoming budding communication theorists. So you should feel very proud of the progress you've made thus far, and I look forward to interacting with you and getting through reading and experiencing your critical assignments. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I look forward to communicating with you this week. God bless.